We good? Peace to the family. You know, that's how us conscious niggas open up their video. It's real talking that. You know, you say stuff so often that I guess that's cool. You say stuff too often that they don't have the same meaning. Like I tell I ask my girl how you doing, she'll say good before you even think about it. Could have had a horrible day. Anyway, I want to do a quick history lesson. And a little insight about history, period. We already know that we lost our history. Kinda. During slavery. And the new niggas out here, and a lot of, you know, just real talk. Who cares? You can live your life and be happy without knowing. Maybe. Depending on what you want to know. Depending on what you want to do. What you aspire to do. So you can't make a person interested in it. It's kind of like a kid. You give them a little history and see if they like it. Then it's like, here you go. It's for you. So that's how we got to do ourselves and re-educating ourselves about history and the purpose of history. So let me get into it real quick. Quick history lesson. First. I'm going to browse real fast. Okay. So our oldest artifacts that we found on Earth. We scoured the Earth. And the oldest artifacts we found on Earth are in Northern Africa. Right? So everybody comes from Africa. They've done carbon dating, things of that nature. You can look up carbon dating and look up how they determine how old things are. You should look that up. And where they found it. Okay? And how old this Earth is. How far people go back. Because you can't just rely on the Bible. Just one book. You can't just rely on, which don't give any times. You can't rely on any religions of that matter. You can't rely on the history that you've been taught. So you got to dig a little deeper. And when you do, and it gets deep, it comes all the way back to how we should unite and make this money together and all this other stuff. It's all one thing. And that's what I'm going to try to explain to everybody. But when you go back to the history lesson, we go back to everybody in North Africa, coming from North Africa, right? All right, so how far back is that? We don't know. I'm not doing the times. But everybody starts in North Africa, probably back during the Pangea times. If you look that up, P-A-N-G-E-A or whatever, that's when all the land masses were won, okay? And they say it was dinosaurs during that time. We were finding people during that time. And it takes no major scientist to tell. A kid can tell you that all the land masses were fit together just like a puzzle. Some say they still don't. Okay. So even though it was during that time or after, we all started in North Africa. And obviously, as natural people, we spread out. Being overly curious, going places we ain't got no business going, of course. Because scientifically, we are at our best near the equator. All people, all human beings. And that's where we started. And not that you can't veer off and venture off and relocate, but you got to at least understand that knowledge. As animals, and looking at everything, there's no polar bears in Africa. You know what I'm saying? There's no whales in the Mississippi River. You know what I'm saying? Everything has its place where it's optimal for it to live. Okay. And we're one of the most, as black people in America, let me throw this in here, we're one of the most misplaced people, a species in history. Okay. Now, I'm gonna be cutting this in and out to, you know, gather my thoughts and everything to keep y'all sliding through here, because I like to veer off sometimes, and I don't want to. I like to, but I don't want to. Okay, so we all come out of Africa. Now, once we spread out and veer off into different parts of the Pangea or after different corners of the world, those that went up north, guess what happened? there was a couple of major events that happened to the world. Maybe a meteorite. There's evidence of that, but I don't want to get too spooky on you. But there was definitely the Ice Age, which might have been a result from the meteorite. Maybe there was two different instances. There were two different instances. There's history in that. We'll get into that later. But there's the Ice Age, and the ice melting, recovering from the Ice Age, is what caused a worldwide water level rise, which a lot of people attribute to the Great Flood. Okay. But after that, there was still I don't want to call it an ice age, but there was still an ice age for certain parts of the earth. So certain parts of the earth was still in ice age. All those people up north that veered off from Africa and went up north, they were stuck in the ice age. They were stuck behind the ice shelf. They lived in the caves. They lived in Siberia and the frozen tundra. And the rest of the world, a lot of rest of the world was either still in Africa or veered off into the Chinese Oriental regions, or veered off into the Americas, the North and South America regions. Okay, but all those were still melanated people. They never did veer off past that shelf, to where those people that got caught past those shelf ended up being there a couple 100,000 years. Couple 100,000 years. Okay, now of course they veered off a little bit, but in general the general population was there and lived there. And the reason why, there's a lot of reasons why. And let's compare the time frame where we're at, what was going on. I mean, if you're living in the ice, if you're living in a frozen tundra, for one, there's no vegetation. We already know vegetation is required for human optimal performance, right? We know that. Science. There's no vegetation up there. Okay? They're in caves, they're in ice cold, they're in ice and snow. They have no choice but to kill meat. They have no choice but to shoot down rabbits and leopards and bears and deers and whatever you find in the snow. And you can come south a little bit, mingle with the people that veered off into North America and the people that veered off into North Oriental. That's how they got a little lighter. Don't get me wrong, people did make it out. That's why North America and the Oriental, especially the northern parts of it, they're lighter. They got intermingled. They were up there a little bit north, a little bit longer. We already know this, okay? I just want you to think about the history of it, okay? So here's the downfall, okay? After a couple 100,000 years, they evolved internally as a species. It takes about 20,000 for a black person to turn white. A couple 100,000 years, that was easy. 20,000 years for a black person to turn white. We Africans, we need that air in our nose to keep us cool, just like dogs walking around here with their big nostrils. But 20,000 years in the frozen tundra, and you're trying to keep that freezing air out of the inside of your body, your nose is going to close. Your features are going to get smaller and closer. That's just evolution. It's no different than a bat that bats used to see, and now they're blind because they're in the dark. Or groundhogs the same way, and now their hearing is better. They evolved from being a pterodactyl or whatever they was before. It's an evolution thing. It happens all the way around. You can't. Evolution, whether you believe in creation or not, which we'll get into that years down the line. Evolution's undeniable. Evolution happens after creation. Evolution happens now. People, minds, everything's evolving. So over so much long amount of time, you're talking about massive changes that you look back like, Africans can turn to white people, huh? Yes, over 20,000 years. Okay, so put that in perspective. It's over 20,000 years. Put that into perspective. It is 2017. It's 2,000 years AD. So times what we've done since Jesus 10 more times. And you're a African person stuck in the frozen tundra, you're going to become white. Your hair is going to be different. It's going to be closer to fur. There is no curl to it. It's hair. It's for insulation purposes. It's hair. It's natty. It's for insulation purposes. So they fighting. Eating meat makes you aggressive. Eating meat deteriorates you in a lot of ways. And if they're getting mad and aggressive and cold, and the women are scarce, and they're fighting, and they're abusing, and they're controlling with the women because they're the minority. After so many 100,000 years, they pack up their things and decide they want to take over the rest of the earth. So that's what they do. They become the Vikings and the Romans, and they come down with fury to the rest of the earth out of the north, where everybody else is living peaceful. They invented conquering and taking over land and expanding. They invented all those concepts. Because before then, there's enough. The concepts where there's enough land for everybody. There's land not being used, just growing on its own. If you need land, and go find you some land. There's enough, to this day, there's enough land on this earth for everybody to have like 300 acres or something. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's probably even worse back then. So, and it was much more abundant naturally. So, everybody was fairly peaceful. If you look out into the ancient writings of Indians, the West Indians, and the Native Americans, and the South Americans, and the Aztecs, and the Incas, and the ancient Chinese, and the ancient Egyptians, and the ancient Middle Eastern. Don't forget the ancient Middle Eastern. You know, they like to separate themselves, so that's fine. The ancient South Africa, you can't look over that. Okay. I'm not even sure if Australia was fully occupied, when Australia was occupied or what. Okay. Once you get out there, you got the land masses a little bit too difficult. They didn't get stuck south, they got stuck north. So they're coming down with fury, and they're taking over. And they're taking over these peaceful people. So as smart as the Egyptians were, as smart, as enlightened as the Western Indians were, you know, as God-fearing backed that the Middle Easterns were, they came down and took over all that. As spiritually connected as the Indians were, the Native Americans were. They came over here and took all that. Now the Indians held out last, held out for the longest, I think. And the Indians held out, and actually the Indians held out for the longest. You know, the Roman Empire came down, and the Vikings came down through Europe and took over northern Africa, took over the Middle East completely. and they took over Africa, especially. They never did really take over Chinese, and they took over America, the Americas recently in the last couple hundred years. So that's basically how that worked out. So after that, they made the structures. And so now they rule the world. They took their land. They made their structures. So, they fight amongst themselves, but they made their structures. They took their land, and they make their international structures and laws, and use it and make money off of that. And they financially control. So they took all their land by force, and now they physically control the rest of the world. Like physically, aggressively control the rest of the world. If you do something to us, we're going to kill you. That's what the history books is going to say about the United States. That's how you got to look at it. What's the history books going to say about the United States as a nation? 4,000 years from now, this is the nation of Slava, and we're on, we're on star planet 372, and our great 10 more great grandkids is reading a history book in class, in their space class. It's going to say the nation it's going to say the nation